The steel of shields echoed in the golden hall of Constantinople, and among the elite warriors who guarded the imperial throne, one name began to stand out: Sten, son of the North, forged by sea and blood. Once a marauder, driven only by the thirst for gold and glory, he now bore the blade in the service of the Byzantine Empire, swearing fealty to the Basileus. The Varangian Guard was his new home. His sword now served the command of a vast and powerful empire, and beneath its walls he found a purpose he had never imagined. But fate, as merciless as the tides that shaped his journey, brought him an order that made the blood of his ancestors roar in his veins. The emperor demanded the death of an exiled king, a monarch who had long since lost his throne but whose lineage still burned like embers beneath the snow. A Norseman, one of his own. To carry out the order was to reaffirm his loyalty to the empire. To refuse, however, was to turn against the power that had welcomed him, becoming a traitor in the eyes of the most feared sovereign in the world. Faced with the dilemma that tore his soul apart, Sten found himself at a crossroads between the oath he had made and the ancestral call that had never been silenced. The gold of Constantinople was resplendent, but the honor of the peoples of the north could not be bought. On which side of the blade would his fate fall? In the harsh, icy lands of the north, where howling winds shape both the landscape and the souls of those who dwell there, Sten was born beneath the sturdy wooden roof of the home of Bjorn, a revered warrior of the Dragon clan. This village, hidden among pine-studded mountains and valleys blanketed in eternal snow, was a place where the lines between myth and reality were blurred, and tales of gods and monsters were as palpable as the steel of swords and the warmth of hearths. From an early age, Sten was steeped in the Viking ideals of courage and conquest. His father, Bjorn, a veteran of countless sea raids, taught Sten not only the skills of combat, but also instilled in him a deep respect for honor and the gods. A true warrior, Bjorn proclaimed, is not he who triumphs over his enemies in numbers, but he who prevails over himself. Sten drank in every word, every tale of battles and deities, while his mother, Helga, wove sagas of heroes and heroines by candlelight, cultivating in his heart a love for the traditions of his people. At the age of 10, Sten faced his first great test. During a particularly harsh winter, he accompanied his father on an expedition that ended in an ambush by a rival clan. Bjorn was seriously wounded, and Sten, still a child, had to take the lead, guiding the group back home through dark forests and treacherous mountains. This journey, fraught with fear and responsibility, taught Sten lessons in leadership and resilience that no training could match. At the age of 15, during a traditional rite of passage for his people, Sten faced the challenge of hunting a great white bear, a symbol of strength and courage. Armed only with a spear and his knowledge of nature, Sten emerged victorious, earning not only the respect of his clan but also a deep sense of self-confidence. This event marked a turning point in his life, establishing him as a potential leader and a standout warrior of the Dragon clan. Over the next few years, Sten grew in stature and skill, forging himself through small battles and rigorous training. At the age of 18, he led his first raid on a coastal village in Scotland, where his skill and cunning secured a resounding victory. This achievement elevated his name, earning him both respect and fear in firesides beyond his homeland. However, Sten's heart was plagued by deep dilemmas. Influenced by his mother's compassionate teachings, he often found himself at odds with the more brutal traditions of his people, especially regarding the fate of prisoners of war. The choice to free these captives, rather than enslave or kill them, caused unease among his peers and heated debates about the true nature of honor and leadership. As Sten approached his 24th birthday, a great assembly was called in the center of the Dragon clan village. A crucial decision lay before him: one that promised to define not only his own destiny, but the future of his people as well. The proposal was a bold one: to lead a journey south, in search of the rich lands of the Byzantine Empire, where opportunities for gold and glory awaited. With the weight of his father's teachings and the hopes of his people resting on his shoulders, Sten knew that the choice he made would echo through the generations. On a night thick with mist rising from the icy waters of the north, the dragon clan, known for their banner depicting a dragon coiling through flames, gathered in secrecy beneath the great hall. There, shadows danced on the walls in time with the crackling of the central hearth, while hooded figures delineated the fate of many. Sten, now with the responsibility of his people etched upon his face, sat at the head of the table, flanked by his father, Bjorn, and his mother, Helga, whose eyes revealed both pride and concern. Bjorn, still robust but scarred by years and battles, stood, his voice ringing through the hall with the authority of a born leader. "This attack we plan is not merely for gold or glory, but a necessity to secure our future against the growing threats from the south." He meticulously detailed the plan. Small groups of warriors, including Sten and his most trusted companions, would infiltrate the Byzantine coastal cities under the cover of night, using the darkness as an ally to sabotage their defenses and pave the way for a larger assault. Helga, with wisdom forged from years of whispered advice and difficult decisions, spoke of the need for caution and honor, reminding them that the true strength of her people lay not only in their bravery, but also in their ability to maintain unity and respect for the fallen, regardless of the kingdoms to which they belonged. Sten, listening intently, felt the weight of each word, but within him, a burning fire of ambition began to crackle brighter. A previously hidden detail of his persona was revealed: his greed. Although he led with honor and courage, Sten secretly yearned for more than just victory. He wished to amass wealth beyond the needs of his clan, dreaming of treasures that would make him legendary, like the great heroes of old. As the meeting progressed, strategies became clearer. They would use fast, light ships, capable of sailing silently through the treacherous currents of the Black Sea. Archers would be positioned on the masts, ready to pick off sentries before they could alert their garrisons. Sten proposed a bold diversion, suggesting an attack on a lightly guarded imperial warehouse where they knew large quantities of gold and supplies were stored. As the meeting unfolded, it became clear that Sten would be the heart and soul of the operation. Bjorn and Helga decided that they would remain at home, strengthening the defenses and maintaining order, while their son embarked on the journey that could very well define the course of his life and that of the entire dragon clan. With his strategy in place and his parents' blessings, Sten prepared to set out at dawn, knowing that the coming moons would test his character and leadership. The plan was set, and the story was ready to be written in the bloody pages of his conquests or in the tragic poetry of his losses. The longships cut through the cold waters of the North Sea like sharp blades tearing through invisible fabric. The strong wind drove the sails, and the roar of the waves mixed with the chanting of the warriors, who rowed with determination towards the unknown. The journey of Sten and his men south was long and treacherous, but it held the promise of untold riches and a glory that would echo in the halls of the gods. The waters of the North Sea were unforgiving, but the Vikings were children of the storm. They passed through rocky archipelagos, where few souls dared to dwell, and faced their first great test, an overwhelming storm. The sky darkened in a matter of minutes, and thunder boomed like the roar of Jormungandr, the world serpent. The longships rocked violently, while Sten held firm to the helm, guiding his fleet with skill, preventing the ships from colliding or being swallowed by the monstrous waves. 3 ships were lost to the sea. The despair of warriors falling into the icy water was a sound that would haunt Sten for the rest of his days. He could see the faces of his brothers in arms disappearing beneath the waves, their hands outstretched in supplication before they were swallowed up by the ocean. There was no time to mourn, however. The storm had passed, but the damage was severe. The oars were broken, the sails torn, and water pooled in the hulls, requiring repairs before they could continue their journey. During the night, while anchored off an uncharted island, they were attacked by raiders from the east, pirates who stalked damaged vessels like wolves prowling for wounded prey. The battle was fierce and bloody, with the Vikings fighting under the pale moon, their swords finding flesh and the screams of their enemies swallowed by the wind. Sten led his men with ferocity, cutting down their opponents one by one, his axe stained red with enemy blood. In the end, the pirates were vanquished, but the battle had left its mark. Men were wounded, supplies were looted, and morale was beginning to flag. But Sten would not give in. His spirit was unbreakable. With fiery speeches, he encouraged his men, reminding them of the purpose of their journey. Constantinople was the jewel of the world, a treasure guarded by towering walls and formidable armies. But they were Vikings. The fate of the gods smiled upon them, and the gold of the empire would soon be theirs. After weeks of traveling, crossing increasingly warm seas, they finally came within sight of the great city. Constantinople loomed before them like a sleeping titan, its golden towers reflecting the sunlight and its immense walls seeming to touch the heavens. It was a sight beyond compare, unlike anything they had imagined. But as they drew closer, a sense of unease began to spread among the warriors. The city was colossal, larger than any village or fortress they had ever seen. It was no vulnerable settlement, but a war machine, protected by vast armies and an imposing naval fleet. They had underestimated Constantinople. Sten felt his heart race. They had brought too few men. The attack they had planned for so long now seemed like an arrogant illusion. Before they could react, bells began to toll from the city. The Byzantines were already waiting. A fleet of dromons, the warships of the empire, appeared on the horizon like predators closing in on their prey. Guns spewed Greek fire, hellish flames that burned across the water, turning the sea into a blazing cauldron. The Vikings tried to maneuver, but there was no escape. Arrows sliced through the air, spears embedded in the longships. Sten fought to keep his cool, ordering his men to row away from the trap, but the Byzantines were outnumbered and strategically superior. Capture was inevitable. One by one, the longships were surrounded and overrun. The Vikings were subdued, bound in iron chains, and forced to kneel before their Byzantine commanders. Sten, defeated, gritted his teeth, his mind boiling over the fatal mistake he had made. The city they had intended to sack had now become their prison. As they were led within the walls, a deathly silence hung over the prisoners. Their fates were sealed. But Sten would not surrender. Not yet. The shouts of Byzantine soldiers echoed across the harbor of Constantinople as Sten and the few remaining Viking warriors were led through the cobblestone streets of the gigantic city. Shackled with heavy iron shackles, they were dragged like common prisoners, their bodies covered in wounds from battles at sea. The townspeople gathered along the way, some throwing rotten food and stones, others laughing and pointing at the once feared warriors of the north. Sten felt the weight of humiliation. His pride burned as hot as the wounds on his skin, but he kept his gaze cold and piercing. They were led through streets that exuded exotic spices and wealth, a contrast to the brutality and harshness of their own lands. They had never seen anything so grand. Constantinople was a different world, larger and more opulent than anything they had imagined. What they saw only confirmed that they had underestimated their enemy. Every palace, every square, every bustling market served as a cruel reminder of the mistake they had made. After long hours of walking, the Vikings were taken to the imposing Hagia Sophia, where Emperor Basileus awaited them. Seated on a throne adorned with gold and precious stones, the Byzantine ruler looked down on the prisoners with disdain, as if they were nothing more than insignificant barbarians. "These are the raiders from the north." The king's voice echoed through the hall, full of irony and contempt. "Men who think they are masters of the seas and invincible warriors. Now they are nothing more than chained dogs." The Byzantine guards laughed. Some spat on the ground near the Vikings' feet, while Sten clenched his fists. But it was not humiliation that enraged him. It was the realization that he had failed, that his clan, his lineage, his name were now the object of mockery. "Send them to the prisons," the emperor ordered, bored. "Let them rot among the rats." And so it was done. The prisoners were taken deep beneath the palace, thrown into dark, fetid dungeons where time seemed to cease. For the first few months, they tried to resist. Sten and his men huddled together, talking about escaping, about taking revenge, about reclaiming their lives. But the days turned into years, and the cruel conditions of the prison took their toll. Food was scarce. Many succumbed to hunger and disease. The damp dungeon air weakened their lungs. The filth corroded their skin. One by one, the Vikings who had crossed the seas in search of glory died, their bodies dragged away by the guards like garbage. Sten watched his brothers perish, their voices fading until only he remained. Years passed. Time made him a ghost of the warrior he had once been. His once strong and imposing body had become thin and scarred. But something in him never gave in. His mind remained sharp, his will intact. He endured every blow, every deprivation, every attempt by the Byzantines to break him. And this resilience caught the emperor's attention. Basilius, intrigued by the survival of this one man, ordered him removed from the dungeon. Before the imperial throne, Sten, now a ghost of his former self, stood. His eyes, however, still burned with the same fire as before. "You are a remarkable man," the emperor said, studying him. "You have survived where no one else could. You have refused to die. That is something worthy of note." Sten remained silent. "You could continue to languish in the shadows," the king continued, "or you could have a new life. Under my banner." The words pierced like sharp blades. The guards murmured among themselves in surprise. The emperor did not offer second chances to barbarians. "Your people are dead. Your home is far away. Nothing ties you to the past anymore. But here, in Constantinople, you can become something greater. Serve me. Become one of mine." There was absolute silence in the hall. Everyone waited for the Vikings' answer. But what no one knew was that Sten had already made his decision before he was even taken from the dungeon. His time there had transformed him. The Viking who once fought for the glory of his clan had become a man driven by something even deeper, greed. And that was what would guide him from then on. "I accept," he said, his voice firm, without hesitation. A new man was born that day. Sten, the Viking, died in the dungeons. In his place, a warrior of the empire, a member of the Varangian Guard, rose. But fate would take its toll sooner or later. Time had shaped Sten into something he had never imagined. 10 years had passed since his capture, and for 2 winters he had been fighting loyally alongside the Byzantines. That Viking chained and humiliated in the emperor's hall had disappeared, giving way to a feared and respected man, now known as Sten, the Sea Cutter. His name echoed in the palace halls and in the ports conquered by the empire. Through bloodshed and a brutality that few dared question, Sten rose through the ranks of the Varangian Guard, first as an elite warrior and, soon, as a lieutenant. His specialty was sea combat. His tactics were fierce and precise, making him one of the emperor's most valuable men. Constantinople was now his. He had land, gold, the finest weapons, and wore armor of fine silver and steel, forged by the empire's finest craftsmen. But no matter how much luxury and power he surrounded himself with, there was something that not even gold could erase. In the silence of lonely nights, when the cries of the dying no longer echoed in his mind, his soul wandered back to the north. His heart, buried beneath the ice of his homeland, whispered a name he tried to forget, Bjorn, and another he dared not remember, Helga. For years, he avoided asking about them, but the shadows of the past were persistent, and now, at 34, Sten began to wonder if his mother still lived, if his father still wielded the blade that had once taught him to wield. The weight of time was making itself felt, but what Sten did not know was that, as he became the Emperor's right-hand man, his name echoed across the lands of the North not as a hero, but as a curse. As Sten bathed in riches and became a lord among the men of the Empire, his parents' fate was sealed in a cruel and inevitable way. News travels fast among the peoples of the North, and Sten's betrayal reached his former clan like thunder in a storm. Bjorn's son, once one of the Dragon people's most promising warriors, now fought under the banner of their enemies. The shock was overwhelming. For the first few months, Bjorn refused to believe it. "My son is dead," he told the clan council. "This can only be a mistake." But then merchants traveling between kingdoms brought more detailed accounts. They spoke of a golden-haired Viking who wielded a Byzantine blade and marched side by side with the soldiers of the Empire. They described a warrior dressed in the Emperor's colors, slaying without hesitation those who dared defy Constantinople. The truth struck like a cold blade to Bjorn's heart, and it was not long before his own people turned against him. How could the great Bjorn, hero of so many battles, sire a traitor? How could a man who spoke of honor and glory have raised a son who had sold his soul to his enemies? The clan council made its decision. Bjorn was exiled. The punishment was worse than death. Exile meant being torn from one's land, from one's ancestors, from everything one knew and loved. No honorable warrior would trade his home for the cold of the aimless paths. But Bjorn had no choice. Suddenly, the man who had once been hailed as a great leader was cast into darkness, condemned to wander without a home, without a title, and without a future. And as if the weight of her son's betrayal were not enough, Helga, the woman who had been with him all his life, fell ill. Sorrow and shame consumed her soul, weakening her body like an invisible disease. With no doctors, no herbs to cure her, her strength faded like the breeze of the last autumn leaf. She died silently, alone, never to see her son or her husband again. Bjorn buried Helga with his own hands, far from the village they had once called home. And then he left, with no destination, no purpose, only the weight of a pain that could never be erased. Meanwhile, in Constantinople, Sten still knew nothing. In the halls of the empire, where silver glittered and banquets stretched until dawn, he wondered if he would ever see his parents again. But without knowing it, he was already alone in the world, and when he finally learned the truth, it would be too late to regret it. The imperial hall of Constantinople was silent, except for the sound of heavy boots echoing on the marble. Sten, dressed in his black armor ornamented with gold, walked towards the throne, where the emperor waited. The warrior already knew that it would be another blood mission, another enemy of the empire to eliminate. This was the price he paid for his place at the side of the most powerful man in the civilized world. The emperor looked up and, in his deep, firm voice, announced, "There is a man in the lands of the north, an exiled leader of a Nordic clan. He represents a hidden threat to the empire, a symbol of the past that must no longer exist. I want you to go there, find him and finish him off." Sten did not ask anything. He was a man of his word, and an order given was an order fulfilled. He bowed slightly, accepting the mission without hesitation. But fate, always ironic and implacable, was plotting something much greater than he could have imagined. Preparing for the journey meant abandoning his pomp and wealth. He dressed in simple clothes, hid his armor, and traded his luxurious sword for a time-worn blade. Only a few men would accompany him, trustworthy men who knew that this mission must be kept discreet. The journey was long and exhausting. Sten crossed rough seas and dense forests, feeling the coldness of the north return to his skin with every step like a ghost from the past. As they sailed across the icy waters, the winds howled like wolves, and the childhood memories he had tried to forget came rushing back. When they reached the first major city in the north, Sten began his search. The taverns were full of rumors, and it was there that he discovered the first clue to his target. An old exiled warrior lived in the north, hidden among the mountains. Something in the story stirred an uneasy feeling, but he ignored it. It was just another job. Then Sten made the riskiest decision of his life. Returning to his old village, disguised as a merchant, Sten passed through the gates of his homeland without being recognized. The faces he saw were familiar, but withered by time. Men who had once fought by his side now wore hardened gazes, hardened by war and the cold of the north. As he spoke to the village elders, he learned the truth he had never wanted to face. His mother, Helga, was dead. The woman who had taught him honor and compassion was gone without him by her side. And his father, Bjorn, the warrior who had trained him and given him his first axe, had been exiled. Sten's blood ran cold. It was him. The target of the mission was his own father. A mixture of anger and despair filled his chest. Sten felt small, crushed by the weight of dishonor. His name was a curse in his home village. His existence had cost everything to those who raised him. Unable to bear it, he left the village before the truth could be discovered. Back at camp, Sten made his decision. He gathered his men and ordered them to return to Constantinople without him. "Tell the emperor that I am dead," he declared, handing them the keys to the chests where he kept all his fortune. "The gold now belongs to you." The men stared at him in silence, but did not question. They knew that something had changed in their leader. Sten was left alone, and now there was only one way forward: to find Bjorn. It took weeks and weeks of searching. Winter made the journey even more cruel, but Sten did not give up. He climbed treacherous mountains, crossed frozen valleys, and asked in each village about the whereabouts of the exile. Until, at the end of the world, he found a small hut. The gray sand beach was melancholy. The sea broke its waves in a slow, sad rhythm, as if the ocean itself knew the pain that resided there. Near the hut, an old warrior walked with heavy steps, his beard and hair now white as snow. He carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, his eyes staring at the horizon as if he was waiting for something or someone. Sten felt a lump in his throat. His knees weakened. It was Bjorn. Upon seeing him, Sten fell to his knees, his pride crumbling like a sandcastle before the waves. "Father!" His voice failed, choked with guilt. I am a traitor. I was a fool." The tears came uncontrollably, and Sten, the warrior of Constantinople, wept like a lost son. Bjorn stood still for a few seconds. Then, a smile appeared on his face, a smile that he had not known what it was for years. He opened his arms, and like a son returning home after years at sea, Sten was welcomed. In the humble hut, father and son talked for hours. Sten told everything. Bjorn listened in silence. In the end, the old warrior simply said, "You had to live your life to understand that not all the riches in the world are worth the price of being with those you love." And with that simple sentence, Sten found the answer he had been looking for all these years. The years passed. Bjorn lived his last days by his son's side, teaching him again about the simplicity of life. Then one day, the warrior who had once been feared by the seas departed, not by the sword, but by old age. Sten buried his father on the grey sand beach, where the wind carried stories that would never be forgotten. He could return to Constantinople. He could resume his position, reclaim his riches. But for the first time in years, he knew what he truly wanted: a new life. He headed west, leaving behind everything he had been. He became a blacksmith in a distant village, where he raised his own family. The battles, the glory, and the greed became just memories, and Sten, who had once sought gold above all else, finally found the one thing that truly mattered: peace. And so, the legend of Sten came to an end. Did you like this story? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next epic sagas. The journey continues.